great. Yeah, thanks for the warm introduction.
Oh, thank you. That was sweet. Well, the screen is yours.
Awesome. Thank you. So, hi, everyone. My name is Kyle, and I am a global vertical insights marketing strategist at Facebook. And I have the pleasure to be joined here with Yoel from Game Refinery. So, I'll pass it to him to introduce himself quickly.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, I'm Joel, Vice President of Games here in Game Refinery by Wangle. Fancy title. What it means actually is analyzing a lot of games with my team and following the trends in the mobile game market.
Great. So today we're going to talk to you guys about genre and why it matters in mobile gaming. Specifically, we're going to be focusing in on the puzzle and hyper-casual genres. And really to sort of start things off, Yoel and I last year
A gente
sort
tem
of
de
partnered
20
on
minutos esse? Beleza.
we partnered on a genre report last year, and so we really want to share some insights from that piece of work to help inform sort of your strategies as you think about these genres moving forward. So why genre? We actually found in previous research that it's actually the #1 driver that influences mobile gamers to try out new games. And it was really interesting to see because this exceeded other things like recommendations
Então, na verdade, eu
from
joguei
family
aqui.
and friends. It also, matters more than things like factors like, the developer or the App Store reviews necessarily that makes people interested in trying out a new game. So very important when it comes to actually getting people to try out new games. And we actually did a big piece of research, global study of 13,000 mobile gamers to really understand the nuances between these genre behaviors. And we looked at 27 different genres and players all across the globe to understand these motivations, and looked at it in addition to some of the internal data that we have that showed some of behavioral insight into what really kind of motivated people to play these genres. And I'll pass it over to Joel to talk about the partnership and how we work with Game Refinery to bring this to life.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Yeah, it's really interesting to be working together with Facebook. Of course, a lot of interesting motivation data, player behavior data. Our part, on the other hand, in Game Refinery was more about looking at the games themselves and the game mechanics and the game features. That's kind of what is our expertise. And what we do is we track games across all genres. We actually track about 59 different genres of games at the moment. And then out of all of those games, we track about 250 different game mechanics and features, like the mechanics or events or you name it, we almost always get it. So it was really interesting for us to be able to kind of combine these two data sets and start looking at what actually drives players, and then when we found out certain patterns and certain motivations, then finding out what kind of features developers and designers can use in order to tackle those motivation drivers that players have.
Awesome. So let's dive into it. And like I mentioned before, we're going to be focusing on the puzzle and hyper-casual genres specifically for today's discussion. And we're going to be sort of talking in a few different ways. So we're going to be looking into, similar to the work that we've done before, what motivates players to play these types of genres, the social elements and the communal elements that comes along with these genres, monetization strategies and methodologies as a part of these, and then lastly, ad preferences and how to attract new players within these genres. And we'll talk, again, globally, so highlight insights we have from US, UK, Brazil, Japan, South Korea, and several other markets. So let's dive right in. And I think I'll kick things off, Yoel, just talking about the key motivations for what we uncovered in this research that really leads to why people choose these genres in the first place. And one thing that we found that was really interesting and almost universal in the sense when we think about the casual and the hyper casual space is there's really 3 core reasons that are the top reasons why people choose to play these games. The first of which is relieving stress. Secondly is passing time in between daily activities. And the third is feeling accomplished because they were able to complete something challenging or that they feel fulfilled completing. So that's kind of universally where we saw a lot of the motivation that really drove a lot of the behavior across these genres. But what's really interesting is in the data that we were observing that there was some gaps in terms of expectations and unfulfilled sort of motivations that people had beyond these 3 core types of motivations that people were playing, but weren't necessarily receiving the full expectation from the games that they were playing within those genres in terms of fulfillment. So these are sort of underserved opportunities that developers can take into consideration when they think about implementing certain features within the game design to really build out some of these unmet needs and expectations. And we'll go through a couple examples of how this is coming to life in the hyper casual and puzzle space. So just sharing kind of like some of the data that we have from the report. Looking at the hyper-casual genre specifically, we actually found that 44% of US hyper-casual players say that they play mobile games to express something unique about themselves, but only 24% say that the current hyper-casual games that they're playing really deliver on this need. So you can see that there's a pretty significant gap in terms of this motivation being really important, but not necessarily being served by the current titles that are within this genre that people are playing. We see similar kind of behavior coming through in the matching puzzle genre, where half of matching puzzle mobile gamers in Brazil say that they enjoy mobile games to learn something new, but only 27% say that the current games that they're playing within matching puzzle are really delivering on this need. So again, kind of similarly, we see these new and different expectations kind of present opportunities of where developers can really play up certain components of their game or certain features to deliver on these needs. And then lastly, an example we pull from the word, brain, and board genre is in the UK, 31% of players say that they enjoy mobile games to immerse themselves in another character or world, but only 9% of the games that they're currently playing really help fulfill this need. So you can see there are a lot of opportunities to really bolster and understand what these sort of motivations are and figure out ways to really deliver on these needs in the type of game that you're offering. And the risk that comes into not delivering on these motivation is really like what leads to churn. So we feel that genre fulfillment or lack of genre fulfillment is really leading players to get a sense of boredom or repetitiveness with these types of games, and leading them to seek out this type of fulfillment elsewhere. So it's really important that we focus on building on these kind of motivations and really offering gamers and meeting expectations when they go to play these titles. And Yuval, I'd love to hear kind of from your perspective where you see features can really play up and deliver on genre fulfillment within the puzzle and hyper casual space.
Yeah, thanks, Kali. Interesting points. Expressing oneself, learning new things, fighting boredom. I think they kind of all are really interesting things. I think designers should really pay attention to. And then when we were talking about earlier, and when we were doing the research, that how one could tackle those kind of motivations or lack of kind of blind spot in games with features. I thought I'd gathered here a couple of key features from the trending markets. First of all, live events is something that all the games are doing. It's really trending in all the games. And recurring live events, what we mean here are kind of instances that kind of loop regularly with the same kind of mechanism, and they are really excellent in fighting the repetitiveness that you were talking about by introducing new mechanics and playable content. And actually what designers do a lot, they might test new things or new mechanics before they actually implement them as a permanent part of the game by using these kind of events. If it works, let's take it to the game as a personal feature. If it doesn't, let's hone it a bit, let's bring it back, test it again. And of course, also, if you think about the kind of sense of accomplishment, that is key in many mobile games. Events can have clear kind of event rewards, goals to complete, and that kind of additional beef to the mix of the regular gameplay, which then gives players opportunities to learn something new and to master the new game mechanics. So this is one really powerful feature that we see is not only kind of catering to the motivation needs you discussed, but also kind of driving the revenues in the top games. Then the second one I wanted to show here is the collectibles album, mainly because if we think about hyper casual and puzzle, especially kind of casual games, they usually focus on the core game experience, and the meta layer is often kind of neglected a bit. But if you want to increase the sense of session-to-session progression in your game, collectibles of different kinds can be really powerful tool. And the great thing about those is that they are easily integrated to almost any kind of core game experience. So if you're making, let's say, a hyper casual jumping game or a puzzle game of match 3 puzzle or a word game or even slots game, whatever, you don't have to change the core game experience when you are thinking about collectible album. You can add them to the meta layer on the sidelines, and then cater to the many motivation, like that Kyle you mentioned, like expressing yourself by bringing different kind of cosmetic collectibles that players can use to customize their avatar or whatever. So that's the really kind of flexible feature. And the last one here, when we talk about the kind of genre fulfillment, are the special play modes. So what they are by definition is that they have different module levels that have a kind of different set of mechanics that the regular gameplay has, different rules, for instance. And this is another great feature if you want to fight the repetitiveness of the gameplay, which can be something that bothers hyper-casual and puzzle players. So this gives you a possibility to bring new mechanics and exciting features and kind of a new vertical for the players to hone and develop their skills and learn new things. Another point I think Kylie mentioned in the motivations part. But yeah, a lot of other features, of course, that you can use. But I think these, if I have to pick three, these would be the ones that are really versatile and can be used in all of the different genres. But I think we had something about the communities as well, Kyle.
Yeah, let's shift gears to talk about the community aspects of puzzle and hyper casual. So one interesting sort of nuance between these genres, and especially comparing them to more like the mid-core genres of strategy and RPG, is that traditionally, like, players usually find the value of this gaming experience to be more personal rather than like the social elements. So we know more than 8 in 10 puzzle players across the US, UK, Japan, and South Korea say mobile gaming is actually a more valuable way to enjoy time to themselves. And there's actually a really interesting geographic nuance here. Whereas some of the players in these markets see it as more of a solo activity, actually Brazilian gamers really feel like the communal aspects in this genre are pretty significant and a big motivator of why they choose this genre in the first place. And we see that come through in both the in-game sort of components of playing with others, but then also when it comes to outside the game and connecting with fellow players and things like online communities. And in fact, we found that 60% of hyper-casual players in Brazil said they participate in online communities related to the genre at least weekly. And if you want a comparison point, this is compared to only 41% of hyper-casual players in the US. So you can see a pretty significant difference between players in the markets in terms of sort of the communal and the social aspects of the gameplay, both inside the game and outside of it as well. However, with that in mind, the one thing that we'd like to call out is there's actually a lot more appetite for social activity within these genres. And actually, we see this come through, particularly as we look into the hyper-casual space, that 67% of players in the UK and 74% of players in the US. So they express interest in more community-driven activities. And this can come through in several different ways, but some of the top like trending aspects that people really express interest in are things like communicating with gaming companies and other players online about certain games within the genre, and also checking out like players' high scores on a leaderboard for more of like a competitive type comparison to see how they're sort of stacking up against either people they know or don't know in real life. So there's really a lot of opportunity when it comes to building out more of this communal aspects to bringing these types of players together in more connected ways. And really interestingly, that players are really welcoming of bringing in developers and gaming companies into their community as well. So we see that more than 8 in 10 players in the UK and US in the puzzle genre, so they'd be open to some type of messaging from game developers about this genre. And particularly some of the areas that they're really interested in learning more from or engaging with content from developers is around tips, tricks, and strategies. So again, ways so that they can help them advance in the game. And again, that would really be a beneficial added value for these types of players. And again, to really kind of build that more of connective social experience for among groups of players in a community, but then also welcoming the developers and the brands into those conversations as well. And Yoel, from a social and community standpoint, what features are you guys seeing on the Game Refinery side that can really bolster and enhance this type of connection among players in these types of genres?
Social elements and elements and kind of a community features are trending all across the board. Not only in casual games that we are now focusing, but also in other genres as well. The first one, which I always want to kind of point out, are the guild mechanics, or also called teams or alliances. And where you were talking about talking about the sense of community, especially in Brazilian kind of market. Guild mechanics are really good in building communities inside the game because they are created by the players themselves, and in guilds or alliances they can chat with each other, play together, and enjoy the sense of community. So guild mechanics are kind of a foundation for other communal features that you can then build upon that. Actually, I'm sorry, I just got my lights went out here, but doesn't matter. So building other features like co-ops, live events, competitive ladder system that you also mentioned. So they're kind of the cornerstone. I understand, and Game Refinery, of course, when we research the games, we see that like hyper casual games might not be the kind of optimal platform for building really, really complex guild mechanics because, of course, they are pretty heavy to implement. But even having a chance to form temporary teams or play together with a couple of random acquaintances is a good starting point that can be used in hyper casual. And then when we move to puzzle games, more and more match-3 puzzle games, for instance, in the crossing top 50 or 20 are using these kind of teams and guild mechanics. The other one, when we go to from peaceful social elements to competitive ones, competitive ladder systems are something that are really helpful in all kinds of genres, because being able to compete with others and then compare rankings is something that tends to increase player engagement across all games. And then competition-based motivations are huge drivers for some players. So even if the game and the core of the game isn't necessarily kind of all about competition, and what we've seen is adding some competitive elements is a great way to boost retention and then kind of monetization, even if the game is kind of peaceful puzzle game or that kind of thing. You can, for instance, look at Homescapes, Candy Crush, all of those games. At least they have kind of recurring live events that are kind of built around tournaments and competition. And the last one, a big theory is the co-op. So playing together, multiplayer, playing together with your friends or then random players. The idea here is, of course, that it's a really highly engaging social interaction feature. It's not too common yet among puzzle and hyper-casual games, but what we've seen is that when you look at the absolute best performing games, those use co-op a lot. So the multiplayer gaming is on the rise across all genres. Then if you think about how to implement that in different genres, in puzzle games, it can be solving puzzles together, helping each other out. Homescapes actually does this pretty well in its recent updates. Then other games can use like advancing side by side in endless platformers or anything like in the hyper casual space. So it's a very versatile feature, can be implemented in so many ways. But the important thing is that the players have a sense of working together and win together, and then that makes them come back to the game usually. But then I think next one, what we have here as a topic is the IIP monetization.
Yeah, let's transition over to monetization. So when we think about monetization in the casual and the puzzle and hyper casual space, we know relative to like some of the mid-core genres that the rate of in-app purchases is significantly lower typically within these spaces. So looking at some of the internal data that we have access to, we see that the rate of players making in-app purchases for puzzle is anywhere between 6 to 7.5%, with Japan sort of leading the market in that sort of sector. Hyper casual, we see it's even significantly lower, where it's anywhere from 2 to 3.7%. So not a ton of players actually move forward with making in-app purchases within these genres. So that really opens up a lot of opportunity for in-app advertising to really sort of subsidize and come through with an additional form of monetization for developers to make money off these genres. For the players who do make in-app purchases, we did see some interesting sort of trends in terms of like their preferences are. One of the things that was really interesting is that players really, when offered the option to have make a direct payment for a specific item or feature versus having an in-app purchase that focused on a random item or sort of random element like loot boxes, most consumers usually choose to have the more direct purchase route rather than the purchase that has a random element to it, which we thought was pretty interesting within these genres. And then there was also some geographic nuances between pay to win options. We found that In the US and UK, players in the hyper casual space said that they should not have options that allow you to win in that type of genre. Whereas in South Korea and Brazil, there's a little bit more openness to pay to win options to kind of like, you know, put a currency or payment to like allow you to kind of advance to a certain level or, you know, succeed in a game overall. But looking at in-app advertising, where there is really kind of a big focus within these genres, there's also kind of some areas of opportunity to sort of improve that experience for players within these genres, particularly around the sort of frequency and the length of different ads. So what we found in the research is actually players within these genres prefer to have actually less frequent but longer ad breaks. We asked them essentially if you had 10 minutes of gameplay and you had to have you know, an ad break in between there, most people would opt to have one 30-minute ad to sort of break up the gameplay rather than a bunch of shorter increment but more frequent ad blocks. So we thought it was pretty interesting. And also offering incentives is a great way to enhance and add value to the ad viewing experience, where, you know, most of the consumers are very open to ads and know that and come to expect them within these games. But, you know, we know 59% of South Korean matching puzzle players actually prefer to, you know, watch ads if there is some sort of incentive that's offered. So considering how you can factor that into your experience can really help benefit the player and really add to the overall gaming experience. And Yoel, what are you seeing from the monetization side that's really sort of playing a role here within these types of genres?
First of all, I think the good division between when it comes to hyper casual and casual games is if you're monetizing the core game or if you're monetizing the meta game. And then, of course, in casual and hyper casual and puzzle games, it usually or traditionally has been the monetization of the core game experience, which is boost items, which I have here on the right hand side, for instance. But then when the meta elements that we discussed in earlier slides, like the collectibles and other stuff, that gives you options to use those loot boxes. So even though based on the data, it seems that the players might prefer direct purchasing of loot boxes, like you point out, Kyle. But what we have noticed is it doesn't mean that loot box systems couldn't be as efficient or even more efficient option to use if you have meaningful content for players to get. For instance, so if you use loot boxes, you should be sure that you have this collectible stuff or enough items or characters in the pool that the loot box kind of makes sense. Or even better, when done right, you can have both kind of things implemented. So you can have direct purchases for core game monetization, like boosters, and then you can use loot boxes for meta game monetization, like with the collectibles. So loot boxes can be a kind of a tricky point to use, but when done right, it can be really powerful. Then on the center of the slide, what I wanted to pick out here is, of course, limited time IAP bundles. Something that has been used, I think, ever since mobile games came to life. So bundling items, currencies, other goodies in discount packages is a proven way to increase player purchases. And that's why almost every successful mobile game with IAPs utilize them. Now that IAP transactions and offerings are becoming more common also in top hyper-casual games, introducing limited time bundle offers to players would greatly increase the revenue potential of monetized items, characters, currency, because if you have a good offer, like a good bundled offer, it lowers the player's threshold for the first IAP purchase they make, which is usually the hardest gate to break. And like Kyle, you mentioned that, was it like 6 to 7% of puzzle gamers are making IAP transactions, so kind of a small fraction. So if you're able to increase that share, that's of course really great for your overall revenue. So the key is to find the right balance between bundle price and then the perceived value versus non-bundled normal purchase when you are kind of toying with these bundle offers. And then, third one, I wanted to pick here is the consumable boost items that I mentioned, of course, focusing on the core gameplay experience and monetizing that. It's only natural to monetize that area in hyper casual and puzzle games. And consumable boost items are quite flexible and relatively easy way to do just so. Of course, you have to be careful with the balancing. If you are giving boosters too easily, or if you're making the levels too hard that players are almost required to use booster items, that might cause some negative impact on your retention. they can be if you look at shooting games, they can be damage boosters. If you're looking at puzzle games like word games, they can be hints and tips. Shields for skill-based platformers and so on and so forth. But as I said, I think the key thing here to remember with the consumable boost items is that as they affect the core gameplay, it's kind of important to pay special attention to the balance issues and then the IAP price points when you are designing them. Because what we have noticed is that if it starts to kind of seem that, for instance, a level in a puzzle game is almost impossible without boosters, that could turn against you, especially with players who see boosters as kind of cheating or winning with boosters is not really winning kind of scenario. So powerful tool again, but like with the loot boxes, have to really kind of think about the balancing.
Amazing. Great. And so I think we can move on to our last section, just on ad preferences really quickly. So when we think about what really entices people to try out these new games, it's really important that marketers and developers really take into account both the components of the advertising and also the tone of the messaging that you're putting out into the marketplace to reach these new players. And what we found is there's few criteria that really resonate well with players across geographies, for these genres. When you think about the actual component of the advertisements and what people really want to see out of it, the top three sort of components that people really prioritize are showcasing the main gameplay and also the character and storyline. So really kind of highlighting what sort of the opportunities are within these games and really making it very visual and compelling. And then also players express interest in being able to interact or try out controls directly within the ad. So consider maybe testing different playable ad formats so people can get a sense and a flavor of what the game has to offer. So that get that quick trial period before downloading the full game. So they have that full sort of perspective going into it. From a tone standpoint, we found that humor is sort of the top tone that people look for in advertisements for these types of game. Particularly resonates very well for the Japanese market and a lot of players in the space in that region. Also, interestingly, challenging, exciting, and adrenaline pumping tones are something that really capture attention. So consider how you can maybe message and try out these different types of tones and formats to really sort of grasp and gather, your new audiences and potential new players through these different types of marketing strategies. And also, not only implementing an effective ad strategy can attract new players, but also, retain lapsed players that haven't played the game in a while. So we found that actually the majority of players in these genres that haven't played your title in the last 30 days would be open to going back to playing that title if they are receiving the right communication in order to do so. And typically that comes in the form of, reminders about game updates or new features, and then also to just any sort of in-game events or activities that are happening to re-engage these sort of lapsed users that can really bring them back to your title. So that concludes sort of our main sections. I think we're probably over time at this point, so I don't know if we can talk about the future of the genres, but we have a lot more material, a lot more insight on these genres, as well as other genres in the mid-core space as part of our report. You can download the full report at fb.gg/genre 2020. It's completely free and open to whoever would like to access it. And thank you so much for listening. We've appreciated you guys inviting us to the event and look forward to connecting with you guys afterward.
Yeah, thanks so much.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kyle and Joe. Thank you for your time and see you around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
VEG Festival 2021, the biggest games festival in Latin America.